Directed by Detol, Banega Swasth India at Bank of Baroda, Charbagh. I'm delighted to present this session, which has been facilitated by Dainik Bhaskar. Ashwin Sanghi delivers yet another nail-biting thriller, this time addressing the fraught and little-known history of Zoroastrianism. Small in numbers and variously prosecuted, the Parsi community has held onto its religion very peacefully. But are they free from the ancient tie-ins with Iran? Traversing through time and geography, Sanghi presents a scientist in the USA and his historian wife, abducted to Ayatollah's Iran to decipher the power of a potent and mysterious life in conversation with Manjiri Prabhu. Ashwin Sanghi is counted amongst India's highest-selling English fiction authors, having sold over 2 million books globally, with over 1 million copies sold in his Bharat Series alone. He has written several bestsellers, including the Rozabal Line, Chanakya, Chant, and more. His latest is The Magician of Mazda. Manjiri Prabhu is an award-winning international author of 19 mystery and thriller novels, a short film maker, and a curator and a founder director of 2 international festivals, Pune International Literary Festival and International Festival of Spiritual India for Humanity and Wisdom. We are delighted to announce the session, and may I welcome Manjiri and Ashwin. Please give them a big round of applause. Can we? There's a short audiovisual. After that, floor will be all yours, Manjiri.
Can you hear me, everyone? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Ashwin.
Good afternoon, Manjiri, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all are doing well.
Well, that was a thrilling thriller. It gave me goosebumps. Did it give you goosebumps? Yeah, I know. Before I begin my conversation with Ashwin as an author, I want to say something, Ashwin. We're talking about The Magicians of Mazda. This is the book. But I want to also talk about Ashwin the Magician. You know, I've known Ashwin for 10 years almost, right?
Yeah.
Since 2013. I haven't met a more compassionate, sensitive, kind human being than him. And in today's age, that's being a magician.
Thank you so much, Manjiri. I have always believed in my life
Yeah.
that it's, and now it's my 15th year in the world of literary pursuit, with no credentials whatsoever in the world of literature or creative writing or anything like that. And the success has felt wonderful. If you had asked me 15 years ago that would I have written 15 odd books and would my name be on the cover of 2 million copies, I would have told you got to be joking. But the one thing that I have realized is that it is nice to be important, but it's also very important to be nice.
Absolutely.
And I think
said.
to be able to keep your feet on the ground and to understand that every word that has been written by you on that piece of paper is not your own word, that it is a big, big blessing from Ma Saraswati, and to understand that it can take 2 minutes for Ma to get upset with you, and then the entire flow will be disrupted. So I think this is very, very important for any writer, anyone who is in the creative space, to keep those to let the creative muse do what it is supposed to do.
Yes, absolutely, and you're doing it very well. I have to say that. So this book, I've been reading it, Ashwin, and what came to my mind when I read it, it's a fascinating book, okay? It's fascinating with tons of research, mesmerizing research. I felt it was like an unabashed storytelling of a seasoned author. You were so confident of your readers. I mean, it's a very charming book in the sense, and I'm not talking about the thrills, I'm saying such a well-balanced book where there's reflection, it's reflective, it's thrilling, there are drones and guns, of course, in it, but there's so much to take away from the book. Before we talk about this book, I want to ask you about your Bharat series, which this book is a part of. So let's start from there. Tell us about your Bharat series, and then you tell us about this book. How did you conceive it? Where did it come from? What was the inspiration and everything with it?
Actually, Manjiri, it did not start as a series. The very first book, in fact, if you notice, all the books basically, play on, for example, Chanakya's Chant, Krishna Key, Sialkot Saga. So, that element is there in all the titles, but not with the first. The Rozabal Line doesn't have that pattern. So that first book was not written with the intention that there would be a series. But what I did realize as I went along, when I went from the first book to the second book, I realized that there is a thread that ties a lot of our stories, and many of those stories are out of public view. We don't understand the fact, when people talk about Bharat, my understanding of Bharat is slightly different to the geographical entity. I know that there is this term which is these days rather political, which we consider to be Akhand Bharat. But a month or 2 months ago, I wrote an op-ed in the Times where I spoke about Maha Akhand Bharat, which is in the sense that if you really look at the arc of civilization and the vital role that Bharat played, why did you land up with these magnificent temples like Angkor Wat in Cambodia? Or why do you have a Ganesh Ji on a currency note in Indonesia? Or why do you have a Ramayana still being performed in Malaysia? Or why do you have so many linkages with, let us say, Iran or Turkey? Why do you have ancient treaties which invoke from Central Asia and Europe that invoke gods like Varun and Indra? So this arc of civilization was very, very wide. And so if you see, for example, a book like The Vault of Vishnu, most of the story is a China story. But we have to keep in mind that even for a place like China, the vast majority of its culture came with the advent of Buddhism. And who brought Buddhism? into China. It was two monks who landed up on a white-colored horse carrying the texts into a temple which eventually came to be known as the White Horse Temple. Or, for example, the fact that there was a monk called Bodhidharma who traveled from the ancient Pallava kingdom into China, and then eventually sought admission at the Shaolin monastery, where he taught them a version of Kalari Payattu and Silambam and Zen meditation, and which eventually evolved into something that the world now knows as Kung Fu. So the point I'm making is that I wanted to explore all of these stories, that where has Bharat had a role to play over the thousands of years, this expanse, and to somehow or the other be able to draw those connections. A lot of people say that, Ashwin, you're interested in mythology. You know better than me that myth is just one part of it. I'm interested more in the overlaps. Where is the possibility that there is an overlap between mythology and history? Where is the possibility of overlap between philosophy and science? Where is the possibility of an overlap between geography and linguistics? All of those elements. But the one thing that is common is Bharat.
So was it not called the Bharat series from the beginning?
It wasn't.
It wasn't. And so
it was actually when the third book came out, the Krishna Key, that the previous books were rebranded as Bharat series.
Okay, wonderful. So, when I was reading, we saw it in the teaser as well, that the canvas of the book is worldscape, okay? I'm going to just read this. We saw it already, but from the blurb, I'm going to read this. From the ancient ruins of Persepolis to the Taliban camps of Afghanistan, from the womb of a Udvada fire temple to the icy mountains of Kashmir, from the dreadful coffin cells of Tehran to the deathly calm of Dew's Tower of Silence. The sheer variety of the geography, culture, regions, history. I'm just thinking of the research you must have undertaken, and what did it entail? Sleepless nights, long journeys into the unknown?
Luckily, I am able to write my books on the shoulders, standing on the shoulders of many stalwarts who've already done the basic research. I can see my dear friend Sanjeev Sanyal standing here, and had it not been for his book on the Indian Ocean, probably a book like The Vault of Vishnu would have been very difficult to write. And there are many examples that I can quote of people whose primary research has helped me a lot. But the truth is that, Manjiri, I would say that for me, every book, I enjoy that process of going through that research. So it's not as simple as simply just going on Google or Wikipedia. It doesn't work like that. Those can be great starting points. The other day I was talking to my son who is 19 years old, and he was busy getting the computer, ChatGPT, to write his essay. So, nowadays you can pretty much get a lot of things, but then where is the romance? What are you trying to achieve with a story? I'm one of those who's always believed that the journey is more important than the destination. So you may start with Google or Wiki or ChatGPT or what have you, but then eventually it should lead you to deeper and deeper layers of research. So for example, and the nature of the research will vary according to the story you are writing. So for example, if I look at a book like Chanakya's Chant, I did not have to do much research except for reading the Mudra Rakshas and reading the Arthashastra. But I read them multiple times in order to be able to pick out the bits that worked well for my story. And that's the great advantage of being a fiction writer. I remember when I'd written my first novel, The Rozabal Line, some press and media young man, he asked me, he says, you have an MBA in finance, you have no qualifications in literature, and you're suddenly writing a book on mythology and theology and history. What qualification you have? And I said, during my years when I was growing up as a kid, my mother used to say ki Ashwin is the best liar in the world. So he's such a good liar, he says it with a straight face. So as storytellers, we know that we are lying. But ultimately, what you want to do is tell the lie as close to the truth as possible, so that then that lie becomes that much more believable. And that's what I do with my fiction. But what is it that makes a lie believable? The lie becomes believable through research. So for example, Chanakya's chant was Mudra Rakshas, but by the time I went into writing the Krishna Key, it was visiting places like Dwarka, Bet Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan, the entire Krishna circuit, as it were. When I was writing the Sialkot Saga, it was talking to people who had lived through the last 70 years of post-independence India in order to be able to pick up the nuances of what had happened, because that is something that you can't get from history books. What was life in, let's say, 1965 Calcutta at that time? So, or for example, Vault of Vishnu ended up taking me twice into China. This Magicians of Mazda ended up taking me into Udwada and Diu and Surat and Navsari. I was supposed to go to Iran, but that Iran unfortunately happened during COVID, so we had to find other substitutes.
So you've actually gone to all these places that you've talked about?
Except Iran.
Okay.
Because it unfortunately my entire schedule got disrupted by the COVID lockdown. But otherwise, but nowadays, again, the other part of it is that today we are living in a time where it's so easy to be able to even do things which you could never have dreamed of doing 5 or 7 years ago. I mean, taking, for example, a walkthrough tour of Persepolis in 3D, virtually, is possible today. You don't need to go to Persepolis. So there are multiple things like that. Talking to people, interviewing people, and of course, reading books. I have always loved reading, been a voracious reader, but typically when I'm writing a book in the Bharat series, I will end up reading at least maybe 20, 30, 40 odd titles. Some of them I'll skim through, some of them I will read in great detail. But it's only after my entire bedrock of research is ready, that's the time when I will actually sit down to start writing the first word.
Yeah, that naturally brings me to your writing process. I've heard, Ashwin, that, I've heard this say, I'm not sure it's true, but you can correct me now, that you use some kind of an Excel sheet or some software to do this. Is that right? Do you do it that way? And let me complete the question. How long does it take for your entire process? How much does it take for you to bring one book out? What is it like?
Let's just go back to the Magicians of Mazda.
Okay.
So the Magicians of Mazda took about roughly a little over 10 months worth of research. And that included, for example, visits to various places. It included the interviews, it included the reading material, and so on and so forth. Once I was done with that, then I move into the second phase, which is typically in terms of the plot. I can see a lot of familiar faces, the ones who have met me at JLF before, and they are aware of the fact that at the initial time when I'm plotting, I will normally work with Excel, and I'll try and actually put every chapter into one row of my spreadsheet. So typically it will be what is the chapter number, what happens in that particular chapter, who is the primary character, and where do I leave you in that particular chapter. So what is the hook on which I leave you, so that you are propelled into your next chapter. My effort always has been that, can I somehow or the other put you in a situation where I compel you to turn your page? You know as a thriller writer yourself how difficult it is to get a reader to turn the page. It's very easy that your reader may give up 10% or 20% into the book, and then you've lost him or her, because the chances of them coming back to it are very, very slim. So I will typically work on that plot line, and if I look at the word count of that, it will probably be somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 words, where every twist, every turn in the story has already been plotted.
So that means before you write the book, you know how it's going to look on paper in that Excel sheet. Okay.
Absolutely. Typically, I also know which character is going to live till the end of the book, which character will die halfway through the book, which character will be such that you think that he or she is dead, but they re-emerge later, or
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do the characters surprise you? I mean, does your Excel sheet go for a toss ever?
So it has happened. Yeah. Typically, whenever I was writing my books along with James Patterson, they used to happen. It used to happen quite frequently, because he would look at the plot outline and he would say, no, this person dies in chapter 10, we need to make him die in chapter 1. We don't have a dead body here, we need a dead body there, or whatever. So by the time I'm done with the Excel sheet, that's typically 2 or 3 months. That's when I will start writing. I use a novel writing software which is known as Script, which allows me to then take my Excel sheet summaries and put them into index cards on Script. So it's like the old bulletin board fashion where you have your index cards for your chapter. And then within the index cards, I'll actually write up each chapter. I always work with chapters which are scenes. So you won't have double scenes in a chapter. So if you and I are sitting on stage and both of us have to collapse because this water has been poisoned, then that's the only scene that will be there in that chapter. Okay, so and then once I'm done with that entire process can be about 6 months. Once I'm done with that process, then I get into the next stage, which is rewrites. And I always believe that the first draft is nowhere close to your 5th or 6th. So you have to, ultimately, what has stood me in good stead is the rewrites.
How many rewrites do you do? How many drafts do you have?
So typically at least 3, maybe even 5. And in spite of that, my editor still will have 100 other issues, which will still require me to go back and do rework. But that's the process of, ultimately you can have a wonderful diamond, a rock, but ultimately the polishing and the facets will appear with a lot of labor.
But for you, what comes first? Is it character? Is it a plot idea? Do you go somewhere and say, hey, I would like to involve this in a book? Where does your inspiration come from? Where are the ideas coming from?
So it depends. Like, for example, the Rozabal Line happened from a chance visit to, I was in Srinagar sometime around 2002, 2003. I had a day extra available to me because my flight had got cancelled. Told the driver to take me to this. Actually, I didn't even point him in that direction. I said, take me to an interesting place. He said, Saab, aap Hazrat Bal jayenge? I said, nahi, Hazrat Bal dekh chuka hoon. He said, Chashma Shahi chalte hain. I said, no, dekh chuka hoon. Because I had been to Srinagar many times. And he said, aap Rozabal gaye hain ki nahi? So I said, maine to suna nahi hai. So we went there. And then I realized that this is a tomb which has stood there for 2,000 years. And the folklore around it is that there is a Muslim Peer who is buried from the 13th, 14th century, but there is an earlier burial under the Muslim Peer, which goes back to 112 AD. And that is a burial which is not in Islamic direction along the Islamic axis, which is north-south, or with the head pointing towards Mecca, but actually in an east-west. And outside the tomb there is a carving which shows a pair of human feet, which indicates where the cross marks for a crucifixion would have been hammered. And so, there are people who say that, listen, we as writers go out looking for stories. Very often it's stories that are coming looking for us. So I was obsessed by that story. I had no intention of writing it. I just spent the next year and a half reading everything that I could about it, talking to people who knew more about it than me, and then it eventually resulted in a story. Chanakya's Chant was inspired by an airport situation where must have been 2009 when the second UPA government came in, and it was taking a lot of time for cabinet formation, and I wondered whether politics was always messy. And I said, let's answer that question when we say the good old days. Were the good old days really good? Or the Krishna Key was inspired by someone who met me at a cocktail party and was utterly sozzled. And he claimed to be the final avatar of Vishnu. I took him seriously because I was also 4 whiskeys down. But the next morning, I wondered whether I'd imagined that conversation. And then I ended up calling up this scholarly gentleman who's based out of Chandigarh, who's helped me on translations of Sanskrit, etc. I said, I need to find out more about the Kalki Puran. And he said, no, I have a translation, I'll send it to you. And that's how the Krishna Key was born. So I think every story will have a genesis. There will always be some trigger that will get you to write that story.
Yes, absolutely. Inspiration can come from anywhere. And destination can lead you anywhere.
But the important thing is to remain open to those ideas when they come. Right. And the other thing is that it's not every idea that is going to result in a story or a novel. So it's very important to capture those ideas when they emerge. Absolutely, yeah. Because then you can go back to those ideas and you can say, okay, now 2 years ago this idea didn't work, but maybe it could work now.
Wonderful. So coming back to this book, and when I was reading it, I realized that there's so much non-fiction in the book, Ashwin, and there are 2 sections to it. One is the thriller, which is, you'll understand when you read it, that there's the thriller story going on one side, and there's a lot of non-fiction which is introduced about the Parsi community. Okay, and I realized that the non-fiction is very powerful. So I have 2 questions on this. Number 1 is, the blurring between fact and fiction is so beautifully and seamlessly done. So how do you do it? That's number 1. And number 2, does the non-fiction get so overpowering that you can't contain it in your outline of fiction? How do you control that?
Yeah. No, it's difficult because the reality is that somewhere along the way, when you do research, when you do genuine original research, you fall in love with that research. And then you somehow get very excited that, oh, dekho, main ye bhi tumko batana chahta hu, and I also want to say this. And in the process, somewhere, you end up compromising the flow of your story because you're trying to offer too much. So you'll be surprised, for example, with The Magicians of Mazda, I knew that once I started writing it, I knew that it will probably end at about 120,000 odd words. So 1.2 lakhs. And I had to consciously work on the fact that I'm not going to allow the historical element to go more than 20 or 25,000 words. So that the bulk of the book would still be the modern day thriller story. See, think about this, really. I have always believed that with the Bharat Series books, what I am trying to do is I am trying to deliver to you what I call the 3 E's. The first E is entertain. Because if I cannot entertain you, Manjiri, you will not turn the page. So I cannot compromise on the entertainment factor, and that has to be 70% of the book. When I do so much of research, there is a possibility that I'm introducing you to material that you didn't know earlier. That is what I consider to be the element of educate. But that cannot be more than 20%. Because the moment it goes beyond 20%, then you will begin to feel that I'm preaching to you. And that doesn't feel good as far as a thriller is concerned. So 70% entertain, 20% educate, and then by the time you reach the last 4 or 5 chapters, I hope that all the pieces of the puzzle will start falling together, and that maybe by the second last or the last chapter, you'll have that batti on moment where it's suddenly, oh, why didn't I think of this? It's that aha moment. And that aha moment, I consider it as the moment of enlightenment, which is when you start thinking of things in a different way. So which is what I'm trying to give you, that final moment where you say, wow, this is this is what I was working towards. So it's 70, 20, 10. Entertain, educate, enlighten. And that's all that I want to do.
Yeah, but how do you do it? That's the most difficult part.
I have always said that don't think of it as writing. It's not writing. There are dime a dozen great writers. For great writing, don't read Ashwin Sanghi. You can use your time in a far more worthwhile manner if you want to read good writing. There are probably, within this location, probably 1,000 better writers than me. Read me if you want a story. So there is a difference between writing and storytelling. And all I want to do is to be a storyteller. There is this, the Hollywood director, Alfred Hitchcock, he said that the length of a movie is related to the endurance of the human bladder. So you can only sit for the movie till the time that your bladder will hold out. Now think of this, that you are sitting in a room and there are 10 people sitting in a circle around you and you're telling them a kahani. You have become a kahanikar and you want them to hang on to your every word. And now in that group of 10 people, there are 3 people who want to get up and take a bathroom break. But your storytelling is so fascinating that they don't get up to take that bathroom break. So the golden rule is that can you achieve that, at least in your mind? So when I'm writing, I'm not writing. I am thinking of myself in that room, telling a story. And with every novel, what I imagine is that I'm not telling you only one story. Let's say, for example, a book like the Sialkot Saga is 150 chapters. And I have actually narrated to you 150 short stories, but every short story is connected to the other. So it's as simple as that.
Amazing. But Ashwin, I think I have to just butt in here and say you've been very unfair to yourself. I think you're a brilliant writer because it's not just, plots. I'm going to say this on behalf of him and me and all the mystery writers in the world, that mystery writing is one of the most difficult, books to achieve because there's a craft in it and that requires craftiness because you need to fool, the reader right till the end and, still make them happy in the end. And that's not easy, okay? So please don't underplay yourself. I think you're a brilliant writer. And considering this, yes, absolutely. This book is really fascinating. It's got so many takeaways, so many. I mean, when I was reading this, I had many aha moments, many of them, okay? And I said, wow, Ashwin, hats off to you.
Thank you.
Yes. So what I want to ask you is, for me, there were, like I said, many takeaways. I learned about the Parsi community. I learned about all the aha moments. I learned about, guns and drones and Iran and lots of things. For you, when you wrote this book, I know you wrote it as a storyteller and you want to entertain, but there must be something in your mind that you felt that the reader should take away from this. What do you think is the biggest takeaway?
Manjiri, we are living in exceedingly polarized times. And of course, it's easy to say, oh, we are polarized now and we weren't polarized earlier. No, we've always had our own various issues to be polarized on. But the one thing that I see as a common thread is that it is very easy to take your eye off the big picture of civilization. I mean, today, if you really think about it, one thing that we can be tremendously proud of in this country is, despite the massive number of assaults that happened on Bharat, Bharat continues to survive, right? And when we talk of Sanatan Dharma, the assaults were many, many. And just look around you. today, what happened to the Mithraic cults of Rome? Where are they today? Zoroastrianism was the state religion during the Sasanian Empire. Today, you barely have maybe something in the order of about 28,000 Zoroastrians left in Iran who still have to actually in some ways remain below the radar because otherwise they can get into trouble. What happened to Osiris, Isis, Horus of the Egyptians? What happened to all the Greek deities? What happened to the Aboriginal belief systems of Australia? So those civilizations which did not keep their eye on their civilization, they eventually got wiped out. And it's obviously telling that till today, we are still very much around, which means that we did not take our eye off the ball. And my effort in writing this book is to tell you, don't take your eye off the ball. It's very important. We owe it to our ancestors, and we owe it to our children and our children's children to not take the eye off the ball, to preserve this.
Absolutely. It's an eye-opener, and we need to be aware and conscious of what's happening around us. Before I open it to the public, there's one last question. I was going through all your Amazon reviews for this book, and there was one very interesting mention there. One of the Amazon reviewers says, I wonder how Ashwin Sanghi manages to think up the stories that he does. What wouldn't I do to get inside his head? So
that's a scary thought.
Yes, so obviously my question is, what does go on in your head? What are you cooking next?
It depends whether it's whiskey time, coffee time, cigar time, I don't know.
Okay.
The thoughts are very different during different times.
All right. But you don't want to reveal what you're writing next?
I can tell you, Manjiri, but
Yeah.
I'd have to kill you.
Oh my God. I think I'm going to take the risk.
No, what I can tell you is two things. Number one, my Bharat series, 7 books have come in the Bharat series. The 8th book in the Bharat series, and by the way, for those who are uninitiated, the series word is a bit of a misnomer because each book within the series is independent and can be read independently. So the 8th book in the series will come out in 2024. So normally there is a gap of 2 years between every book in the Bharat series. The little change that has now happened is that I had written 2 out-and-out crime thriller novels along with James Patterson. And now I have decided that I'm also going to build on that particular space. So in 2023, I will also give you a crime thriller which is not part of the Bharat series. The effort is going to be, at least as far as the Bharat series is concerned, to continue giving you a novel every 2 years till I die.
Fantastic. That's going to be a lot, many books. That's great. So let's open it. We have exactly 7 minutes and 54 seconds. We will quickly take, I'm going to start from the pink, lady in pink, yes. Is there a mic that can be given? Yeah. Please keep your questions short and direct.
Ashwin, fabulous reading you. I've read pretty much all your work and I love it. You answered one of my questions. Is the new crime thing that you're doing with James Patterson, or it's independently?
No, it's independent. I've already done 2 books with James.
Yes.
And now this new book which will come out will be part of a series which will be a crime thriller series which will have the same set of characters repeated across multiple novels.
But not the same character as the James.
No.
So are you planning to collaborate with him again? And
unlikely, because given the fact that now I think to a certain extent I have also, working with James was a little bit like a master class. Because I'm used to writing novels which are about 120,000, 110,000 words. With James, it's far more wham bam, thank you ma'am, 70,000 words, you should be done.
Yeah.
Every chapter should be about maybe 600-700 words, and the adrenaline must be kept pumping throughout. So in that sense, a lot of that stuff I seem to have already imbibed. So to that extent, yes, there could be opportunities that may open up later. But for the moment, for the next at least 6 or 7 odd years, I want to try and give you one crime thriller every year.
I mean, I truly loved your crime thriller. I think at
We
times
will-
a quickie is the best.
I think we'll have to go on to the next question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The one in the blue scarf. Please give him the mic.
I've come all the way from Australia, just lucky
Wonderful.
to be here. I was reading a book, Chanakya's Chant. I missed my stop to the work. The train went halfway back home. It's a page thriller. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Very much for that.
Thank you.
And your research is exemplary. It's amazing.
I don't know how many will agree with you. You know, the great advantage of being a storyteller and a fiction writer is that I can put on page 1, this is a work of fiction. And so as a result of which I can take substantive liberties on the story. But yes, I do, as I was mentioning, ultimately I know that I'm spinning a story, I'm spinning a yarn, but I try and spin that yarn using elements which are real. And so to that extent, I do try and do a bedrock of research.
Ashwin, I got 2 doctorates. Your research is exemplary.
Thank you, sir.
Let's take the gentleman at the back
Thank you.
with the cap.
Thank you, sir, for coming.
Hold it close.
Could you, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming here. Thank you for your books. I'm into your 3rd book, the Sialkot Saga, right now. And do you know that you are known as Dan Brown of India? And how do you feel about it, sir?
So I must tell you, I had the great fortune. Dan Brown is an idol of mine, and the first book, the Rozabal Line, would probably not have emerged had it not been for the Da Vinci Code. And sometime in 2014 or 15, I think, Dan Brown was here in India, and he addressed a gathering in Bombay, where I was told that, listen, since you are called the Indian Dan Brown, why don't you do the job that Manjiri is doing, which is that why don't you ask questions to Dan? And after we were done with that particular event in the evening, he said, what are you up to for dinner? So we went out for dinner together, and we sat till about 2 in the morning, talking about stories that excited us. And as it turns out, after substantial amount of mind lubrication, which was produced not only by spirituality and spiritualism, but also by spirits. By 2 in the morning, he asked, what is your version of God? And I wrote on a napkin, G is equal to infinity minus K. So he said, what is that? I said, see, this is a formula I've used in the Krishna Key. And I said, G is what we consider divine. And infinity is the whole Brahmand. Universes that are present, future, past, multiple, infinite. And K is the extent of human knowledge. So what we don't know, we attribute to the divine. So the Egyptians didn't know that the sun is a giant ball of fire. They thought it was the sun god Ra travels across the sky in his chariot, and when it's the end of the day, he gets tired and he goes to sleep and it becomes night. And later on, we realize that no, it's a giant ball of fire around which we revolve. And suddenly, poor Ra lost his divine status because we could understand it. But the amazing part about these sort of equations where you have infinity at one end means that fundamentally the equation is indeterminate. Which means, in other words, no matter what you do, that equation will not be determined because of the fact that the infinity symbol is on one side of the equation. And that is the unique characteristic of the things that we can't explain. I think what binds me to someone like Dan is the fact that we are out to try and explain some of them. And because we are storytellers, we can take liberties in trying to explain them. Probably if I said half of the things that I did in a work of non-fiction, probably I would not be here to talk to you today.
The gentleman in the black, yes. Can you just give him the mic? We have exactly 1 minute left, so if you want another question, you'll have to be, yes.
And welcome to this programs.
Thank you.
Basically, I want to say, sir, so many times you have mentioned the research world. So, the good writers should have the research skills also. So, what type of research you mention in your writings? Please mention. What type of research you mention?
It depends. As I mentioned, there can be multiple types of research. It could be simply just, like for example, you take a book like the Sialkot Saga. Obviously, I had to read several books on post-1947 history, because this is a story which is set in 70 years post-independence India. But more importantly, I needed to talk to people who had lived through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s in order to be able to recreate that time. If a young man was taking a young girl out for a puchka pani in Kolkata, then how much would that puchka pani have cost? Or for example, if you were planning to go out for a very fancy dinner in Bombay, then where would you have gone? So those are things which you will not get from history books. It's talking to people. In some cases, it could be visiting places. Most of the Krishna Key story actually emerged from my visits and my travel. And of course, there are other stories which have emerged purely from reading. So it could be reading, it could be traveling, it could be talking to people, interviews, it could be keepers of the Kalachakra. I had to spend 6 months teaching myself quantum theory. Luckily, I had two very dear friends who were IIT products, who were willing to devote 1 day a week in order to be able to bring me up to speed on quantum theory. That's the only way that I could push myself to talk about quantum theory. So, yeah.
We have time for one quick last question. Okay, the lady who's been raising her hand for a long time. Yes, please give her the mic. You'll have to keep it very short because we have 50 seconds if you want an answer.
Thank you. Hello, Ashwinji. How
Hi.
are you? My question is, as a storyteller and a writer, of course, you are so creative. There must be 1,000 ideas swimming in your head all the time. How do you pick and choose which idea you're going to pursue for the next 365 days to produce a book out of it?
So typically, for example, right now, I've just been through the process of figuring out what will be the idea for Bharat Series 8. So I've spent the last 2 months with about 6 ideas in my head, which I whittle down, and I keep successively killing each idea for some reason or the other. So I will go through a process of successive elimination. It's like very clinical. Okay, now you're dead, now you're dead, and eventually there's only one idea left standing. And that is the idea which I will write about. So you have to be clinical about that.
Well, that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much, Ashwin.
Thank you, Manjiri.
A big round of applause for the brilliant Ashwin
seriously.
Sanghi.
And a round of applause, guys, for yourselves.
Yes.
What a lovely audience. Thank you.
The book is available. Please get it signed. It's a rare, rare chance. And you have to sign my copy too. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ashwin Sanghi.